welcome to the Sports Guyz for another edition of Weekend Update, November 11th, 2024. This is Veterans Day. I just want to do a shout out to all the veterans out there, whether you're serving now, whether you served in the past, whether you're a family member of supports. Just thank you so much. We can't give you enough thanks as a country and as a people for those folks that gave the ultimate sacrifice and those folks who are protecting us today. So thank you, and hope you had a great Veterans Day. How you doing, Robbie?
I'm doing well. Really well, thanks.
Good, man. Well, Robbie, let's start with you, man. What are some of the big highlights coming out of the weekend you want to highlight for the people?
Decent amount of upsets in college football. I said that over the last 2 weeks, we would know a lot about the playoff picture. And I think that's true. I think we know something even more true, and that is every team this year is beatable and has flaws. The closest thing to an unbeatable team is Oregon, but I wouldn't put them in that category. I think if they played Georgia and Texas, one of them would win. So it's just interesting. There's really no powerhouse teams that are unbeatable this year. So it is pretty exciting, and it's a really great year to break out the 12-team playoff.
I completely agree with that. Same thing for me coming out of the weekend, the big upsets. And to me, what is amazing is the best two defenses in the SEC right now are Ole Miss and South Carolina. So when you say that LSU, Georgia, and Alabama are not the two best defenses, they really aren't. They're all very vulnerable. And you see Georgia got run all over by Ole Miss. They were ramming it down their throats. And that's not a championship defense in my mind. Mm-hmm. So I really have a lot of concerns for Georgia. I really do. After that game, they just got bludgeoned by Ole Miss. So I agree with both of you. I think that there's no dominant team this year. Oregon is beatable, and it's going to be. It makes the tournament even more exciting. It makes it a lot like the basketball tournament because you really don't know what's going to happen.
Well, I was looking at a lot of defensive stats today, and I was surprised how good Ole Miss is. Texas has actually been leading the country in a lot of stats throughout a lot of the year. So Texas is technically the best defense in the SEC, but Ole Miss is really far up there. And if you look at offensive and defensive stats, it kind of tells a story of why they're such a difficult team to play. The biggest disappointment for Georgia has been, out of all things, its offensive line. It hasn't been dominating. If you look at the hurries and the sacks they're giving up and the lack of running production, it's an abnormally bad offensive line for a Georgia team.
Rob, you think about Jackson Dart from Ole Miss got hurt in the first series. They bring in the backup quarterback. The backup quarterback throws 10 passes the entire game, 2 of them touchdowns. And otherwise, they just ran it down their throats. And they knew the run was coming and they couldn't stop it. And that's Georgia. Right. So it's real concerning. So Georgia, Ole Miss, a lot of people don't think it was an upset at all. Last week, we were saying Georgia was the best team in the country and had only had one bad half of football. I think, Rob, after reflecting on that a little bit, I don't think that's actually true. I think that if you really look at Carson Beck this year, he's struggled in more than just one game. And have they won some of those games?
The team has overcome it because they're so powerful.
Yes, I agree with that. But I think that this team is going to go where their quarterback takes them. When you get into the big games against the big teams like Oregon and Iowa State, he's going to need to come up big or they're going to lose. And so I don't think that that's actually true. I think Georgia has overcome in some games that he hasn't played well. And now you finally saw in a game where he really was pretty abysmal. In addition, their defense was pretty abysmal in this game, which was really surprising. Ole Miss,
their defense didn't play well. That's true.
Ole Miss had their way with Georgia's defense, and it's very surprising. Even with a backup quarterback, Jackson Dart was hurt a lot of this game, and they still ran it all over them and passed all over them. So,
Jackson Dart got 50 yards rushing. He did a really nice job.
He came in late.
The defense was the key here. What I didn't realize is how highly ranked they are. They're the second highest ranked rush defense in the country, and they're 6th in total team defense. So their defense is the star of the show.
The best defenses in the SEC are Ole Miss, South Carolina, Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the best defenses in the.
And I still put Georgia in there. I think Georgia's defense was shook how badly their offense was playing and couldn't quite overcome it. I still think Georgia's defense is very, very spectacular, but they ran into a buzzsaw a little bit.
They did. This really sets back their chances of getting into the playoff. I still think they might slip in. They're going to have to win out. A 3-loss team in the SEC is not going to get in, I don't think.
Ole Miss was able to move the ball enough to get 5 field goals, but think about it: 15 of their 28 points was where the defense stopped them, and they had to resort to field goals. So, the defense played well enough. I think it was the offense that was so pitiful they could not overcome, and a lot of it starts with that offensive line. Like I said,
I agree with that.
The line wasn't up to par, and they gave up 5 sacks, an interception, and there were 2 fumble recoveries.
I think for most of us in the country, this was shocking. I think for people who know the SEC inside and out, the SEC insiders, this was not that surprising. The way that Ole Miss was playing coming into this game, they had been destroying teams. And, the way Carson Beck has been really shaky the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think that Georgia has been buying on borrowed time a little bit, and they needed a loss really badly, and they got one. But I think generally speaking, they're one of the best teams in the country still.
This next game, Oregon goes to 7-0 in the Big Ten. They're new in the conference, and they're just destroying the Big Ten, which is amazing. They played a pretty solid Maryland team that can put up a fight and beat them by 3 touchdowns. So I just think Oregon scores so many points that no matter how competitive you think you are, you get so far behind, you just can't make it up. That's basically what happens. So they were sitting at 29-10 deep into the third quarter, and Maryland tacked on a kind of a useless touchdown towards the end of the fourth quarter. But what do you think of Oregon?
Oregon dominated this game in all phases. Not that it was a total domination, but they won the offensive side of the ball with offensive line play was spectacular. Dylan Gabriel looked great with 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. They got defensively 3 turnovers, and they gave the ball away 0 times. A lot of those stats play nicely to getting a win. Rushing yards, 180 rushing yards for Oregon, only 83 for Maryland. So they just kind of won most of the statistical categories, and they pretty much just kind of chipped away and kept hammering. And it was like a heavyweight fight where they just were pummeling their opponent.
True.
They
still the number 1 team in the country in your mind?
Yeah, but beatable. I feel like somebody could get a hold of them with a good defense and pull off an upset. But yeah, I think they're the least flawed team that I've seen. I think every team has flaws, and they have the least of them.
Right. Ohio State didn't even have a match against the worst team in the Big Ten, 45-0. Complete wipeout. They bring in their backup quarterback in the fourth quarter. Purdue doesn't even look like they should be in the Big Ten. They can't score any points. So anything you can take from a game like this, or does it just feel like an early season, play a really bad team kind of blowout?
It kind of felt like the Oregon blowout. Just domination in every way. Categories all point to Ohio State: time of possession, yardage. Will Howard had a nice game, 260 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's what you want to see from your quarterback, where you're trying to build confidence back up after you've been shaken a little bit. Defense had a really nice game. Ohio State is very highly ranked defensively. They're second in total team defense in the country. So I think they're very easy to overlook because they slipped a little in expectations. But at the end of the day, I still think they have the most talented roster in all of college football, very closely followed by Oregon and Texas. And I still think Georgia and Alabama belong to up there, but they are not quite as stellar. So that's how I see it. Ohio State's playing good football.
They really are. They're solid. All their big receivers got touchdowns. So it was really nice. They all got big touches.
Yeah.
So Miami goes down. You and I have been kind of calling this for a while. They have been skating on the edge of barely winning games 52-45, and just barely pulling things off, sometimes getting down as many as 21 points and finding ways to come back and win. And they were just playing it too close. And they come up against Key, who's a really good coach for Georgia Tech. And this game, Georgia Tech just felt like they had it under control the entire game, and end up winning 28-23. Key, the coach for Georgia Tech, is now 6-1 against ranked teams in the ACC. So he's just like the giant killer. And everyone knew this was going to happen one of these weeks because Miami had been so on the edge, and this just happened to be the week that Cam Ward couldn't bring him back. Any thoughts?
Two stats that jumped out to me that kind of told the story. I think rushing yardage, Georgia Tech 271 and Miami 88. They controlled the game. They controlled the clock. They controlled kind of the way the game was flowing. And the other thing is third down conversions. Miami was 3 of 10 and Georgia Tech was 9 of 14. So they were just marching the ball, and Miami's D couldn't stop them. So that's kind of what happened.
I agree with that.
There was a huge hit in this game that really made some headlines, which was amazing.
I feel like he outcoached Miami. He really did. And he came in with a great game plan, and they executed it. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, they did a nice job against Ward. Ward still had a nice game, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, but he did have a fumble. And they got to him 3 times, 3 sacks.
And also, you know what happens when you run the ball almost 300 yards? You keep the ball out of Cam Ward's hands.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. They controlled the game. They didn't let Cam Ward do it. And you could see Ward's face. He's just exhausted, carrying the team every week with no defense. And you could see it on his face, how he felt. He just looked completely disappointed and like he had nothing left to give.
So Miami's still a top 10 team. Where do you kind of slot them right now?
Yeah, I think they're right around there, right around 9 or 10.
Now they're number 2 in the ACC behind SMU.
Yep.
No one saw that coming.
Their offense is very impressive. They're going to beat a lot of decent teams because they're going to outscore you.
That's true. Yep. Next game, Texas, I thought would get a really good match from Florida, and it just didn't turn out that way. They had a 35-0 lead at halftime, and it looked like Texas had a real chip on their shoulder in this game. They've been told for a couple weeks in a row that they weren't a top 5 team. They weren't good. They weren't going to win the title. They hadn't beaten anybody, and it just looked like they took it out on Florida in this game and just took out a can of whoop ass.
Yeah, that offensive line really played well. 6.8 yards per carry is what Texas averaged.
And Ewers didn't want to hear it anymore. It just looked like he just was on a mission in this game to absolutely dismantle Florida.
Yeah, they averaged 6.8 yards a carry, and Ewers had 5 touchdowns. So they were balanced and just smashed Florida. I think it was even less close than the score would indicate, 49-17.
I found it interesting that the athletic director of University of Florida yesterday came out and said that Napier's going to be back next year. It's almost like giving his coach a vote of confidence. So I thought that was interesting. He felt like he had to do that after this big blowout.
Well, they've had a lot of disappointing games, but I will say Florida looks a little better.
They do.
Recently. Not this last game, but the last few games prior to this. They started the year terribly. It looked like Florida and Florida State were going to be neck and neck with the bottom falling out, but Florida kept it together and actually had some nice wins and nice games. This is the
first time in a long time Texas really did look like a top 5 team. Just domination from beginning to end.
I think they're healthier. Ewers is gaining confidence, and they have a stacked roster.
Next one we have is Penn State bounced back after their disappointing loss to Ohio State and dominate Washington, who's a pretty good team. Didn't even let them score in the first half and just dismantled them and ended up putting their backup quarterback in the second half and never really were threatened in this game and just really took them apart. Defense played well, quarterback played well, and they kind of feel like they're back now. Any thoughts about this get well game?
Defense played great. 5 sacks, 1 INT. Alar played awesome and had a 94.1 QBR. So I think they just handled them. It was 24 first downs for Penn versus Penn State versus 14 for Washington. So it's 24-14 in first downs. That's domination.
It is.
That's your defense not getting them off the field, and that's them getting you off the field.
Well, Penn State will now go up into the top 5 again and be that kind of second big.
They're about 7. That's where I put them, about 7.
Mm-hmm.
To me, they're right there with Tennessee.
That makes sense. Speaking of Tennessee, they beat Mississippi State, who's one of the worst teams in the SEC. 0-6 in the SEC, matter of fact. Tennessee just kind of dismantled Mississippi State, and Nico finally played well in the first half for the first time in 5 games. And Tennessee was never really threatened in this game. They've got a great defense and won a really solid SEC victory, 33-14. Anything to take away from this one?
Dylan Sampson, that's the takeaway. He's 26% of their offense. He ran the ball 30 times for 149 yards and a touchdown. And I think how he goes, so goes Tennessee.
Do you know who they said? Do you know who they said he reminds them of, who also played for Tennessee?
Who?
Alvin Kamara.
Kind of.
A lot of people think he's kind of like an Alvin Kamara.
I think he's more powerful.
Yeah.
More
that's
powerful.
right. Yeah. He's going to play on Sundays, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. I would take him in a heartbeat. I think he's probably the second best running back.
I agree with that. Yep, after Ashton Genty.
Second or third, yeah. He's right there.
We were really wondering if Indiana, although they had been undefeated, could beat a good team, a really solid team, and they did so here, 20-15, close game. Go to 10-0. A lot of coaches around the country are talking about Indiana's no fluke. They've put together a really nice roster. They beat a Michigan team that we've talked about a lot of times this year, even though they're 5-5, are very limited when it comes to their quarterback play. And but Indiana was able to control this game really from beginning to end and definitely had a nice halftime lead. So thoughts about this one? Does this put Indiana on the map at all?
I think it does. I've been very reluctant to give them the kudos because I've been so nervous about their resume. And they finally played a real Michigan team that is down from last year, but still has horses in the offensive and defensive lines. Michigan is ranked very highly on defense, and they've struggled on offense a little bit. But I wanted to see what it looked like against a really good team. And I will say that it didn't look as pretty as it has. There have been a lot of blowouts for Indiana this year, and this wasn't
because Michigan has a pretty good defense.
Michigan has a really good defense and really created problems for Rourke. He threw an interception, and he got sacked 4 times, and his QBR was 44.4. But he's a good leader, and I love Indiana's defense. Actually, they're awesome. They are really a strong defense. They play really good complementary football. They're so well coached. I love Cignetti. I think he's one of the best coaches in football, and he should win Coach of the Year.
I do too, for sure.
It doesn't always have to be pretty. You just have to get the win. You have to find a way to win. And in this particular case, they beat a really good team. And it was a struggle. It was tough. It was a tough game that they pulled out.
By the way, Oregon is not the only team that's 7-0 in the Big Ten. Indiana is also 7-0 in the Big Ten. No one saw that coming.
This is the first time where I think they can match up against the big boys because now we've seen it. I'm not saying they'll beat Texas or Georgia or Oregon
or Ohio State.
Not in those orders, but Ohio State. But I'm saying that they could get in the arena with them because they can handle the big boys.
That's right.
By beating Michigan. So
next game, BYU must have like some kind of horseshoe or something on their side because they find a way to win on a last-second field goal. This is one of the upsets I picked this week. I thought Utah would, in a spoiler role, find a way to knock off BYU. I figured BYU would at least get one loss this year. And this was the game I thought it would be, and they proved everybody wrong and went to 9-0 with a 22-21 last-second win. Really tough game against two rivals. So thoughts on BYU and them sitting at 9-0 and continuing to rise?
They're finding ways to win. Retzlaff is a good QB who didn't play very well against a tough Utah team that people expected more from. So I think Utah's a wounded animal who's pretty angry, and they were talking playoffs until probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago when it all came apart. So BYU beating Utah, that's a pretty good win. It was kind of ugly the way they did it. I think it was a tough road game for them.
You noticed that Utah had a 21-10 lead at half and that they didn't score in the second half. So,
Yep.
BYU did some real talking in the halftime, and their defense really came up big here.
Yeah.
To shut them out.
It didn't tell me very much, but at the same time, when a good team plays badly and they find a way to win, that tells me something.
It told me something for sure, because this is the one I thought they would lose this year, and they didn't.
Yeah.
Barely.
BYU made some errors, clock management errors. They threw a pick in the red zone.
This next game, I know Florida State's down. They're sitting at 1-9. By the way, after this game, they didn't even wait till Sunday. After this game, they fired 4 coordinators.
Mm-hmm.
Florida State totally cleaned house. They did not fire the head coach yet, but they fired 4 coordinators after this game, and Notre Dame looked like the best team in the country playing Florida State. I know they're not, but it was a complete demolition and an indictment on the Florida State program, and almost to the point where, they won 10 games last year. They're going to have to start from scratch.
Yeah.
To get that bad.
Whatever talent they have left is going to transfer out. So now they're dead in the water.
For sure. Yeah.
I guess Orville's a good coach. He's going to have to figure this out. But Riley Leonard had a great game. He had a touchdown, 215 yards throwing, 70 yards rushing, and 2 touchdowns rushing.
I was really surprised how well he ran the ball. I know he can run, and he ran with Duke, but man, he looked good in this game.
I know. And Notre Dame's defense just lit Florida State up. 8 sacks, a pick 6, 2 interceptions. Mm-hmm. They were just dominant. They just smoked them.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So Notre Dame just handled them in all phases.
So says more about Florida State or more about Notre Dame?
Florida State, the condition of Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice sign for Notre Dame. Don't get me wrong. It's not an indictment on Notre Dame, but it just didn't tell you much. It shows that the Florida State program has quit, and now they're just getting smoked.
Well, we had a bunch of surprising results, but this might have been the biggest one for me, and that is I thought Alabama might win by a touchdown. Mm-hmm. This was at LSU. This was in Death Valley. It was at night on a Saturday night. It's one of the toughest places playing college football. Nobody wants to go in there. Mm-hmm. And Alabama dismantled, completely destroyed LSU to the point where they're now wondering whether Kelly's the guy. Nussmeier's confidence was really shaken in this game. You have the Alabama offense just went off. Their defense went off. And they got a real signature win that they needed very badly to get back into playoff contention. And the theory coming into this game was whoever lost this game was not going to make the playoff.
Right. This was an elimination game.
Right. So what are your takeaways on this game? Because
for me, it was simple. This game is simple. Jalen Milroe. He was the best athlete on either side on the field. Mm-hmm. He had 109 yards throwing, 99.3 QBR, but more impressively, 12 carries for 185 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns rushing.
185.
185 yards rushing. They couldn't tackle him. They couldn't stay with him. They couldn't stop him. So he was an absolute hammer. Rushing yards, 311 for Alabama against 104 for LSU. That's 3 times as many.
Do you think Kelly's going to have nightmares about Milroe?
Yeah. I mean, I guess they've tried to spy him, but there was no way to do so. They didn't have anyone fast enough. So
Mm-hmm. Do you think
that's
he's
why
going to play? You think he's going to play running back at the next level or quarterback?
I don't know. I don't know. Depends on who picks him and what they see in him. Maybe at the
He might be a running
combine,
back.
he
Yeah.
could easily be a running back.
Yeah. Or he could be like a Hurts. Maybe he's a developmental quarterback with speed.
He could be a Jaden Daniels,
Could be. He's
fast.
not as good a thrower right now,
Got to
but
work
yeah.
on the throwing. Obviously, he's got
Mhm.
time to do that. But throwing is not something that is inherently built in. It's learned.
True.
Throwing is a skill that you learn through practice.
That's true.
And some people have a little bit of an innate ability, but it's just kind of repetitions, So
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather somebody like Milrow go to an offensive mind, somebody who can use that tool.
So clear that Alabama's back in the playoff picture.
I've always thought so. I've always thought they're in the top 4 or 5 teams. So yeah, but I mean, who knows? Who knows? They've had a couple of bad games this year, so they need to keep it rolling.
So next one, Boise plays a really tough Nevada team. These two have a rivalry game every single year. So although Nevada came in 3-7, this is always a tough game for Boise. They did win. Ashton Genty with over 200 yards rushing and a touchdown again. Played really well. Quarterback played well. Tough game. It was at home, and they won 28-21 and keep their playoff hopes alive.
I mean, Boise State dominated on the ground and found a way to win. It wasn't the most impressive victory, but it was decent. The rushing yards was staggering towards Boise State, and Boise's defense did just enough to keep down Nevada, but that wasn't a real impressive win in my opinion.
I
It was
agree with
okay,
that. I agree with
solid.
that. Yeah, held serve.
Yeah.
Next one, our friend Luke. His team has lost 2 in a row.
Sorry, Luke.
Particularly brutal for them because it's to Kansas, which is one of the worst teams in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
Drops them to 7-2 and most likely out of the playoff picture now with 2 teams ahead of them that have a better record, and it's going to be really hard to catch up. This game was really high scoring, actually a really exciting Big 12 game. We've talked about Big 12 this year being very exciting if you like offensive football. The defense on both sides was trash. And Iowa State, unfortunately, their quarterback had a couple really bad picks that just couldn't happen, especially a pick six that was devastating at the end.
For the most part, both offenses were clicking overall and got a lot of points. But I will say that out of the two, Kansas's defense came up a little bigger. They got a pick 6, and they did 3 sacks. So, but offensively, Kansas looked really powerful. They looked really powerful. Their quarterback played well. Their running back looked good, and they threw the ball nicely. So they were the better team.
They were impressive
on that day. The one word that I thought of when I watched that game and came away from that game was Kansas is powerful. You put them up against the big boys, maybe they won't look like that. But against Iowa State, they looked powerful. They looked fast and strong.
Agreed.
They were clicking on offense, and they got just enough plays on defense to keep it away from Ohio State. And then they got the upset. So
it was another upset. Yeah, we've had several upsets each week. Next one means a lot to us. Our Virginia Cavaliers, as you see here, go to 5-4, win on the road in Pittsburgh. It was a huge win for our program and a devastating loss for Pittsburgh, who's trying to stay in the playoff hunt and drops to 7-2 in a weak ACC. So the Virginia defense, I'm not sure I'd seen us have a defensive performance like that in a long time. It was really impressive.
We've had a couple in the beginning of the year. We had a couple defensive performances like that. And then the wheels kind of came off against Maryland. And then it's been kind of off again until recently. And then a really good defensive performance again. So we clearly have some great defensive players, some stars that got a little pushed around against Maryland, but
And then for Sanker, they were highlighting him on ESPN College Game Day the other day. And then the next day after this game happened, they were highlighting him on ESPN again. And the panel was saying, this guy's going to play on Sundays.
Yeah.
So he seems to have worked his way into enough prominence that
he had a really nice interception, and
he's going to get picked. It'll probably be a late pick, but he's going to get picked.
I wouldn't think that late. 3rd round, maybe.
3rd round, yeah, 4th round, somewhere in there. Really, really solid. And I was
He's got
stunned.
a good body of work.
It wasn't just him. I mean, the pass rusher is great. The linebackers played well. We got some turnovers. You had sacks going on. You had just deflections. Pittsburgh was just kind of stymied all day by this defense. It was pretty cool to watch.
Yeah.
Enough plays on
Virginia
offense.
had Xavier Brown. He had 68 yards rushing and a touchdown, and 28 yards receiving and a touchdown. So he was kind of the main weapon.
Ran really well, yeah. We haven't seen much of him this year. He hadn't been the feature back, except this game he really broke out.
Yeah, Pace and Brown kind of,
Pace.
But Brown looked good.
Pace scored as well, so that was a big touchdown for us.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Then we got Colorado, took care of business again. They beat the team that beat Iowa State the week before. Texas Tech had been playing really solid. This actually was a really good game into the 3rd quarter, and then Colorado turned on the Jets and had those wide receivers show what they're all about. With Hunter scoring and Wester scoring and all these guys, and Shedeur Sanders just making it look easy. What are your thoughts about
Shiloh Sanders got a scoop and score.
He got a scoop and score, and did you see the dance he did?
Yeah.
He did.
He did Deion Sanders.
That was I love that. I absolutely love seeing him call out for his dad.
That was a big highlight. I'm sure he was proud.
Yeah, so both of his sons score in the same game, and one son has a great game passing, and the other one gets a scoop and score.
But you know who came up big was Colorado's defense against Texas Tech.
That's true.
They had 7 sacks and an interception and 2 fumbles.
That's right.
That's pretty good.
So is there still a path for them to try to sneak into the playoff? I know it's tough.
Absolutely.
They're still looking up at K-State and BYU.
I think they can get in there.
We'll see.
Shedeur Sanders is one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the league. You got Travis Hunter, who I think is going to win the Heisman. And the defense has been surprisingly good this year.
Well, I'll tell you, they have far surpassed it. I thought they'd be about 4-3 by now, and they have far surpassed anything I thought they could do this year. So it's been really impressive. Next one is Washington State, who no one talks about. They've snuck up into the top 25. They're sitting at 8-1, 5-0 at home. Washington State wins 49-28 against a pretty good Utah State team that can really run the ball. And they're creeping up. No one's talking about them. They're not in a conference right now. And you just have to wonder if this is a team that could maybe give Boise State a run for that number 12 seed.
Possible. They're playing really good football.
We kind of discounted them about 5 weeks ago, but they've won about 6 in a row. And it's
their offense dominates, and their defense just hangs in there. But their offense is awesome. Their quarterback, Mateer, had 4 touchdowns. And throwing and 1 touchdown rushing. So he accounted for 5 touchdowns.
I feel like they haven't been on the radar until this week. Now they're on the radar. They're going to be a top 20 team. Yeah, they're there now. Virginia Tech, I thought, had a chance. They had a 7-0 lead at half against Clemson. We're playing really good defense, and then Klubnik kind of took over in the second half, and Clemson played like Clemson. Took this game, but it wasn't mega impressive.
It was a weird game. The first half was downright pitiful, and then the second half looked better.
Right, looked better, but even so, it still wasn't impressive. And I really felt like all along Virginia Tech had a chance for this upset, but they just don't have enough offense right now. Clemson gets the job done against a tough Virginia Tech team that's real scrappy.
You know what happened? Clemson dominated the time of possession. And so what they did was they just slowly wore them down and kind of dominated it enough at the line of scrimmage to where they finally took control in the second half.
Right. After they lost to Louisville, everyone kind of discounted Clemson, but can they pull themselves back up into contention?
I don't know.
Were they too far back?
They feel a little flawed.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a good win by them.
I think they could beat anybody on a given day.
It's a good win by them because Virginia Tech is tough. They're scrappy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're scrappy for sure.
Next team here, Missouri, had been struggling a little bit recently, and they really had a big win against Oklahoma. They needed this one badly to go to 7-2. Oklahoma goes to 5-5, and the whispers continue about whether they're going to fire their coach or not at the end of the year. 5-5 doesn't play too well in Norman. But what does this say more about Oklahoma being not good this year, or is this Missouri being resurgent?
I think Oklahoma's not very good this year. They gave up 4 fumbles, a touchdown scoop and score fumble, and 3 sacks, and just they couldn't block. It wasn't a good performance for their offense.
Right. And really, their defense hasn't been very good this year.
And their defense
has been a defensive coach.
Been okay, but not great.
Yeah. I still think Missouri's the outside looking in, but I wouldn't completely discount them if they go on a little run here at the end.
I think I'm going to discount them, but they're just outside. I think outside that 12.
Of the playoff. Yeah,
they're going to be just outside the thing, looking in at it.
I agree with that. Last game here, Army goes to 9-0, the first time in 70 years. 70 years that they go 9-0. Beat North Texas 14-3, run the heck out of the ball like they always do. How excited should the service academies be about this season?
It's a very special season. I'm really proud of them and how they're doing. They're playing a brand of football that can't get you very far all the way, but it can beat a lot of decent teams. They just pound the ball on the ground. Think about it. It's kind of funny. Bryson Daly is their quarterback who had 4 passes, completed 2 of them. He threw 1 pick and 1 was incomplete. So
he was 2 for 4.
He was 2 for 4, but he was 3 for 4 because 1 went to the other team. But 36 rushes for 153 yards and 2 touchdowns running.
Think about the time of possession they have because they run the ball all the time. Like, how frustrating is it for the other team? They never get the ball.
Well, this is the amazing part. Time of possession, 41 minutes to 18.
Wow.
They just hold the ball the entire game. And
That's right. You do.
North Texas is pulling his hair out because they can't get their hands on the ball.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But yeah, when that quarterback has 153 yards and 2 touchdowns.
I feel so good for Army, for Navy, for all the service academies today on Veterans Day. Really proud of these guys.
Yeah, me too.
It's been a lot of fun to watch. So let's talk about Georgia's Carson Beck and his struggles. So you look at his last 6 games. Alabama was the best of these 6, and he had 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Auburn, he had 2 TDs. That was his only 0 interception day. Mississippi State, he had 3 and 2. Texas, although they won the game, he had 0 touchdowns and 3 picks in that game. And Florida, 2 and 3, and then Ole Miss, 0 TDs and 1 interception. And he just looked completely lost most of the day. So what are your thoughts generally about his struggles? And, is he going to help this team go to where they want to go, where they expect to go, or is he going to be the reason that they get held back?
I'm not sure Kirby Smart's the guy to fix this problem. He's a defensive guy. His defense isn't looking that great right now, and his offense looks worse than that. I still think they have a good body of work for the year, but they have this huge flaw of their quarterback turning the ball over, and nothing seems to be working with getting that under control. So I just think they have the wrong guy at the helm. I think Carson Beck's the wrong guy.
I agree with that. I don't think he is good enough to lead this. And by the way, he also lost his top 2 targets from last year in Brock Bowers and Lad McConkey. And so that's really hurt him as well. So his top 2 guys are not there.
Yeah.
All right, our winners of the week. We got Alabama. We got BYU. Ole Miss gets themselves into the playoff discussion. Indiana goes to 9-0. SMU and Boise State. Any concerns with any of these 6?
No, BYU's is kind of ugly, but you keep going. I think Penn State came back after looking a little rough last week.
True. It could be.
I wouldn't quite put them in winners of the week, but close. So
the best team of this group, probably Alabama, but Alabama. I don't know. Would you want to play Ole Miss right now? I wouldn't.
No, because their defense.
About anybody in the SEC want to play Ole Miss? Probably no. So best team in the ACC probably is SMU right now.
Yeah,
which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, we want to play any of these 6 teams, to be honest. They all have their strengths.
That's right. Losers of the week, we got the Hurricanes finally go down. We got Vanderbilt, who lost it in blowout fashion, only could score 7 points against one of their rivals. It was really surprising. Their offense has been so good all year, and all of a sudden they just got completely clamped down on. We've got Georgia. It's their 2nd loss of the year. Very disappointing fashion. Really got blown out.
They didn't look good.
LSU, same thing. Completely blown out against Alabama at home. Nobody saw that coming. Iowa State gets knocked out of playoff contention now. And Pitt with an inexplicable loss to Virginia, which, of course, I'm delighted about, but was really a head-scratcher for them. They were trying to stay in playoff contention. So any problem with these 6?
No, they're pretty good. Those are pretty good choices.
Okay. I got tired of putting Florida State out there. They were there every week. This is the AP Top 25 poll after all the upsets. Oregon stays at 1, Ohio State at 2. Texas vaults up into 3. Penn State back to 4 after their big win. Indiana, first time in the top 5. Tennessee at 6. You had them at 7. They're at 6 right now. BYU 7. Notre Dame goes from 10 to 8. Alabama goes from 15 to 9. And Ole Miss, first time in the top 10 this whole year. Georgia plummets to 11. Miami also plummets to 12. Boise still rising. SMU still rising. And Colorado, first time in the top 20. So any thoughts about any of these?
No, it's pretty good. It's going to keep fluctuating around as they all play each other. I think Penn State at 4 is too high. I think Army at 16 is too high. A&M at 15 is too high, I think.
What about South Carolina? I mean, nobody talks about them, but they've had a couple weeks in a row where they're really dominant.
Yeah, they're good.
Playing great ball.
Yep.
Washington State, obviously up in the top 25 now, sitting at 8-1.
I basically like that list the way it is.
You think Alabama's a top 5 team, but they're not there yet?
Yeah, I think they're headed that way. They took their lumps. They're a very talented team. They have some flaws, but what I've discovered is there's no team without flaws this year. So
looking at if the playoffs were held today, this is what the bracket would look like. You'd have Oregon, Big Ten champ, Texas SEC champ, Miami is the ACC champ, and BYU as the Big 12 champ. And then the number 12 slot would be Boise, and they'd play Ohio State, who's the 5. Alabama at 11, playing Penn State at 6. Notre Dame 10, playing Georgia at 7. And then Indiana at 9, playing Tennessee at 8.
Man, that's a rough matchup. Notre Dame, Georgia. Whew.
I know.
Sheesh.
Sheesh. So you'd have those 4 teams with a bye, and then you'd have 4. I think these would be all really competitive games. I'm not sure.
I don't think BYU is 4.
Well, no, the only reason they're 4 is because
No, I
they'd be
know,
the
but
Big
I'm
12
saying
champ.
that that's out of whack.
It's because they'd be the Big 12 champ.
And then
Yeah,
I
either
got to
way,
admit, Miami sitting there, I'm not sure about either. So
it could be SMU, you know, if
yeah.
they win it.
I feel good about Oregon and Texas.
I think Ohio State would dismantle Boise State, to be quite honest. They're just not the same level program.
Yeah, I agree.
And then I think
Especially look at the second half scoring. Ohio State would wear them down.
I think Tennessee would wear Indiana down in the second half. I just think playing an SEC team would be really tough.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Bama, Penn State would be a good game, and Notre Dame, Georgia would be epic. Be really fun to watch. So heading into the MLS, we're now in round 2. Unfortunately, my Charlotte FC got knocked out by Orlando. They gave up a goal in the 90th plus 12 minute. It was really devastating. Had a lead and then gave up that goal and then lost in penalty kicks. You can see the bracket to the right there. LAFC playing Seattle, LA Galaxy playing Minnesota, Orlando playing the shocking Atlanta United, who knocked off Messi, Inter Miami, and then NYC playing the other New York team, the Red Bulls. You now have LAFC and Galaxy emerging as the favorites in this tournament. And you have Messi suffering the biggest shock in MLS history. Any thoughts about this bracket, getting down to the last 8?
I think it's really bad for soccer that Messi's out, but LA Galaxy.
Yeah. Galaxy and LAFC. You might have an all LA semifinal. They can't play each other in the final, but semifinal.
Yeah.
Probably going to end up with like a LA New York type final. Should be great for ratings. Yeah, exactly.
Sports.
I don't know which LA team it'll be. We're going to see. It's been exciting. I've been really enjoying watching the games. So going to mailbag segment. This is the funniest one I could find of you for the week with your tongue out.
Not bad.
You got any good ones for us this week?
Yeah, I do. Before I get to that, there were a couple of funny stories, interesting stories that hit. First was Auburn basketball. Did you hear about the fight?
No.
There was a fight on the airline that made the plane turn back around between 2 Auburn players.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And they're ranked number 2 in the country. And they just went, and then there were 2 forwards that were fighting on board, and there were blood everywhere. Like they were beating each other up. And they turned back around. Then they went and flew out at a different time and went and beat the number 1 team in the country, Houston. So,
oh my gosh,
that was interesting.
Scrappy.
Very scrappy performance. Yeah. Also, the firings you talked about. Josh Allen moved into second all-time for Bills rushing touchdowns. So that was pretty interesting. Did you see Sean Hockley reffed the game in Munich?
I did see that.
Yeah, Ed Hockley's son, and he did some of the reffing in German. So that's cool.
In German, I saw
Very
that.
interesting.
Yeah, I saw that.
Did you see the Cam Bynum celebration? I hope everyone out there got to see it.
We're about to watch it here right
about that, so that's cool. Other than that, we had some mailbag this week. First one is loving the in-depth analysis. This is why I watch Sports Guyz. And that was from the NBA NHL preview. That was at Sonia Almeida. Thanks, Sonia, for that comment. We try to be as in-depth as we can, but honestly, we just tell you what we think, and we amass as much information as we can, and we pretend like we're having our daily drives to work when we're talking, and that's why we started this whole thing. So, but we're glad that you enjoy it and that you learn something from it, and please keep the comments coming. We really love hearing from everybody. Next is finally a balanced NHL and NBA preview in one place. Thanks, Sports Guyz. That's from Silvano Santos, at Silvano Santos. Wow. So same episode, last one we had. Thank you for that comment. What were your thoughts there, Tommy? A balanced.
That's great. We put that program together. We led off with NHL and then went to NBA, and I'm glad you guys really enjoyed it. I thought that was a great episode, and keep those comments coming.
It was fun putting it together. Last one is loved learning about the history of pickleball. Great episode. This was from our pickleball one, and that was at Miss J.
Oh, wow. Miss J.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
So pickleball, we have a lot of.
Drop us a comment where you play. We'd love to hear some of our fans who actually play pickleball and tell us some of your stories. It'd be great.
Yeah. And that's it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Robbie. Well, let's go to some of the clips we're going to show.
Philadelphia. Hurts has time. Now locates Barkley out of the backfield. Barkley slips 2 tackles and picks up the first down. Jumping up in the air to the 30. A gain of 14 for Barkley.
Out of moves right here. Makes the first guy miss. The spin move at the last second. Bro. And then, what, Tiki, you're right. What is that?
Bro, we got to see this again. Special, man. Just, you didn't even think to do that.
That was one of the greatest plays I've ever seen in football. And what was interesting is right at the end of that game, he was immediately drug tested. The league always drug tests after a huge performance where somebody does something that's superhuman. That was my favorite celebration of all time, I think. Cam Bynum comes through.
Why did he like her again? What was the reason? There was some story.
Well, he was on the U.S. track team.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think he was there. I'm not even sure if he ran, but he was on the track team. And so I think he was following the Olympics closely, and he just liked that whole performance. I think he was making fun of it, but I think he was drawn to it because he found it intriguing, and I think it was hilarious. That was the best celebration I've seen in a long time, probably ever.
That is awesome.
I loved it. It was so well done. He said he was saving that for a while, but being a corner, he hadn't had a lot of opportunities to use it.
But he was on the track team, right?
Yeah, he's fast.
That's awesome. Or here's the last clip of the night, and we're going to close out.
To win it.
Chiefs have won! The Chiefs have won! A 51, I think it was Dana who got through. He's missed the last 3 games with an injury. Watch 51. Boy, they all came through.
I think it was Karlaftis, or it was either Karlaftis or Chanel. There's 50. There's all kinds of 50 numbers in there in the mix, and.
So that's what I was asking Zach, is what in the world happened, and how can 4 guys get through the same gap? How is that possible? Like,
it looked like just the line caved in. I'm not really sure why or how, but it did.
It was just unbelievable. I cannot believe that they allowed that to happen at that moment. But, it just, again, looks like they got out-coached with a team that cares about special teams,
I think, I don't know. Blocking an extra point, a field goal is so lucky, There's just a lot of luck.
They overloaded that side. They had 1 blocker for 4 guys. That's just – I'm sorry.
But the offensive line is supposed to be able to handle that.
All coming through the same gap?
Yeah, everyone's supposed to shift left.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a huge breakdown by the Broncos. Should have won that game for sure.
Yeah. Something along that shift didn't happen, and that's what you have to get to the bottom of.
Well, final thoughts on our weekend as we close out Veterans Day?
Well, it was a great week in sports again. There were interesting stories, great celebrations. Big upsets in college. Decent amount of upsets in pro. Just great sports week. MLS was intriguing. So just a lot of fun stuff to catch up to, and it was fun. It was a fun week.
Well, your Dolphins are winning 10-6 right now, so it's a good thing. We'll close out now. We'll go watch the end of Monday Night Football.
Let's go.
Dolphins.
Super Bowl, baby.
And thank you guys so much for joining tonight, the Sports Guys, for Weekend Update. Thank you to Zach Thompson, to Rob Pope. Let's have another great weekend of sports coming up. It just gets better and better, and we're really excited to see where this goes. And the playoffs are approaching in both leagues. And let's have a great week.
Thanks a lot, Zach, for joining us. I know you had to go, but we appreciate it. And thank you to all the veterans. I know we said it earlier, but I wanted to say it as well. For all your service, keeping us safe, and really sacrificing to the veterans and their families. The sacrifice is huge and much appreciated, and we are forever indebted. So thank you.
All right, we'll see you guys next time on the Sports Guys. Have a great night.
See you.